Sometimes you meet someone who seems untouched by the things that move everyone else. Not stronger, not louder, just untouched. The room around them behaves normally. People speak, laugh, argue, explain themselves. Reactions rise and fall the way they always do. Someone becomes excited about an idea. Someone else grows irritated by a small disagreement. Another person tries to smooth the tension with a joke. Emotion moves through the room like weather. But one person remains steady. They listen. They respond when necessary. They sit in the same space as everyone else. Nothing about their behavior is openly strange. Their voice is calm. Their posture is relaxed. If anything, they appear composed in a way that others often admire. Yet something about them feels different. When people speak about personal frustrations, they nod politely. When someone shares good news, they offer the expected congratulations. When the room becomes tense, they do not rush to calm it or inflame it. They simply remain where they are. Most people move with the emotional current of the room without noticing it. A raised voice raises their own voice. Laughter spreads quickly. Anger travels from one person to another almost instantly. Emotion is contagious. But the untouchable seems immune to that contagion. Their reactions arrive slowly, if they arrive at all. They do not mirror the mood of the room. They do not seem carried away by praise or shaken by criticism. Compliments pass across their face like brief shadows. Disapproval appears to land and disappear just as quickly. It is not that they do not hear what is said. They hear everything. They remember details. They follow conversations carefully. Their attention is present in the room. But attention does not automatically become feeling. Over time, people begin to notice this quiet difference. Some admire it. They see composure where others would lose control. They interpret the calm as maturity or strength. In moments of conflict, they may even look toward the untouchable as the most stable person in the room. Others feel something less comfortable. When emotions are shared openly, people expect a kind of exchange. One person reveals frustration and another offers sympathy. Someone expresses excitement and others join the enthusiasm. These small emotional exchanges create connection. But when the untouchable listens without entering that exchange, the connection feels incomplete. Not rejected, just unanswered. It can be difficult to describe. The untouchable does not insult anyone. They do not withdraw physically. They remain present in the conversation, following it with interest. And yet their presence feels slightly distant, as if an invisible space exists between them and the emotional rhythm of the room. Over time, people begin adjusting their expectations. They stop looking for strong reactions. They stop expecting dramatic responses. Conversations around the untouchable often become calmer, more controlled, almost careful. No one says this openly, but a quiet understanding begins to form. Whatever touches most people does not seem to reach them in the same way. Praise arrives and passes. Criticism arrives and passes. Conflict appears and fades. The untouchable remains where they were before it all began, watching, listening, and giving very little away. This is where Jung would begin to look beneath the calm surface. At first glance, the untouchable appears strong. They do not react quickly. They do not lose control of their emotions. The events that disturb others seem to pass across their life without leaving much trace. To many people, this looks like resilience. But Jung would ask a quieter question. What had to be pushed away for this calm to exist? The human mind has many ways of protecting itself. When something becomes too painful, too confusing, or too overwhelming, the psyche learns how to move that experience out of immediate awareness. It does not disappear. It is simply placed somewhere deeper. Jung called this movement a form of repression. Memories, emotions, and impulses that feel too dangerous to hold in the open are pushed into the shadow. They remain part of the person, but they are no longer lived consciously. For some people, this happens slowly over time. A disappointment that could not be expressed, a loss that had to be endured quietly, a moment when vulnerability led to humiliation rather than understanding. Each experience teaches a small lesson. Feeling openly is risky. At first, the mind may only protect itself in specific moments. A painful conversation is ignored. A criticism is dismissed quickly. The person tells themselves that the situation simply does not matter. But the psyche learns from success. If distancing from pain makes life easier, the mind begins to use that distance more often. Emotions are held further away. Reactions become more controlled. What once felt intense becomes something observed from a slight distance. Jung would notice how the untouchable begins to develop this habit of observation. Instead of entering emotional situations fully, they remain just outside them. They watch their own reactions forming and choose not to follow them. The feeling appears, but it is not allowed to grow. Over time, this creates a new kind of balance. The untouchable becomes difficult to disturb. Insults lose their force. Praise loses its ability to excite. Moments that would create conflict in others pass quietly. From the outside, it can look like emotional mastery. But Jung would remind us that the shadow does not disappear simply because it is hidden. Everything that is pushed away continues to exist somewhere inside the psyche. Emotions that are not expressed remain stored in silence. They are no longer visible in daily behavior, but they have not vanished. The untouchable may genuinely feel less affected by the world. Yet part of this calm may come from a different place, not from the absence of feeling, but from the careful closing of certain doors. Jung believed that the mind prefers stability, even if that stability comes from limitation. When painful experiences are sealed away successfully, the psyche learns to protect that arrangement. The untouchable may not consciously remember the moment this process began. It often starts quietly. A decision not to react. A habit of stepping back from difficult emotions. A growing belief that distance is safer than exposure. Eventually, the person begins to move through life with this protective structure fully in place. They are present in the room. They listen. They understand what others feel. But somewhere beneath the surface, the mind has learned a rule that guides everything else. Nothing hurts if nothing is allowed too close. This is where Nietzsche would become interested in the untouchable for a very different reason. Most people move through life closely tied to the reactions of others. Approval feels good. Criticism feels painful. Praise lifts the spirit. Disapproval creates doubt. In many ways, the emotional life of a person becomes connected to the judgments of the people around them. Nietzsche believed that much of human behavior grows from this dependence. People seek recognition. They seek validation that what they are doing is right, admirable, or at least acceptable. Entire systems of values develop around this desire. Morality, reputation, honor, shame, all of these forces shape how individuals behave in society. But the untouchable begins to drift away from this system. When praise arrives, it does not change their sense of direction very much. When criticism appears, it does not disturb them in the same way it might disturb others. Compliments do not inflate them. Insults do not crush them. The reactions of the room lose their power. To many observers, this looks like emotional coldness. People often assume that someone who does not react strongly must simply care less. They may even interpret this distance as arrogance. Nietzsche would look at it differently. He would say that a person who is no longer governed by the approval of others has stepped outside one of the most powerful forces in human life. When praise and blame lose their authority, something else begins to guide decisions. The untouchable becomes less predictable. Instead of asking what others will think, they begin to ask a different question. What do they themselves consider worth doing? What direction feels correct according to their own sense of judgment? This shift can be unsettling to those around them. Most people feel safer when others respond to familiar emotional signals. A smile invites a smile. Enthusiasm invites enthusiasm. Disapproval invites apology or defense. These exchanges create a shared rhythm that keeps social life stable. The untouchable does not always follow this rhythm. When others celebrate success loudly, they remain calm. When criticism appears, they listen without becoming defensive. When someone attempts to provoke them emotionally, the reaction often never arrives. The provocation loses its purpose. Nietzsche believed that individuals who develop this kind of independence are often misunderstood. The world expects people to respond in certain ways. It expects emotion to follow the same patterns again and again. Someone who steps outside those expectations can appear strange, distant, or even threatening. But for the untouchable, the experience feels different. Without the constant pull of praise and blame, life becomes quieter. Decisions are no longer tied to how they will be received by others. They are measured against something internal instead. The noise of social approval begins to fade. Nietzsche sometimes described this moment as a form of freedom. Not freedom from responsibility, but freedom from the invisible pressure of collective judgment. The untouchable walks through the same rooms as everyone else. They hear the same opinions. They see the same emotional reactions unfolding around them. Yet the weight of those reactions does not land in the same place. They remain present. They listen. They understand what is happening. But the approval of the crowd no longer decides how they move. And once a person begins living without that invisible leash, the world starts to look very different. Not louder, not easier, but quieter and strangely more open. This is where Machiavelli would begin to see the untouchable not simply as a personality, but as a position. Most people move through life with their emotions exposed to the environment around them. Praise lifts them. Criticism unsettles them. Approval strengthens their confidence, while rejection can quietly reshape their behavior. Because of this, influence becomes easy. If someone understands what another person fears, desires, or hopes for, those emotions can be used to guide their decisions. A compliment can soften resistance. A threat can produce compliance. Even small gestures of recognition can create loyalty. Human emotion is often the shortest path to control. Machiavelli understood this very clearly. He observed that people rarely act from pure reason. Their choices are pulled by pride, insecurity, ambition, fear, and the constant desire to maintain a favorable image in the eyes of others. In such an environment, emotional reactions become openings. But the untouchable closes many of these openings. When praise does not inflate them, flattery loses its purpose. When criticism does not disturb them, intimidation loses its force. When anger fails to provoke a response, confrontation begins to collapse on itself. The usual levers stop working. This does not mean the untouchable is immune to the world. They still hear what is said. They understand the intentions behind the words. They see when someone attempts to provoke, persuade, or manipulate the situation. But they do not respond automatically. Between the attempt and the reaction, there is a pause. That pause changes everything. In that space, the untouchable can decide whether the situation deserves a response at all. Many conflicts dissolve simply because they refuse to feed them. Many provocations fade because they do not provide the reaction that was expected. Machiavelli would see this as a powerful advantage. When one person remains emotionally steady while others react quickly, the balance of influence shifts. The room begins to move around the person who cannot easily be pushed. Others may grow frustrated by this calm. They may try louder criticism, sharper remarks, or stronger attempts to provoke a reaction. Yet the untouchable often remains the same. They observe, they listen, and they choose their moments carefully. Because emotional distance also creates clarity. Without the noise of anger or excitement clouding judgment, it becomes easier to see what people are trying to accomplish. Their motives appear in the structure of their actions. Their intentions reveal themselves through repetition. The untouchable does not need to guess. They simply watch long enough. Machiavelli believed that power often belongs to the person who understands the situation more clearly than the others involved. Not the person who shouts the loudest, and not always the person who moves first, but the person who chooses the right moment. Emotional detachment makes that moment easier to recognize. The untouchable may appear quiet, distant, even indifferent. Some people will interpret this as weakness or lack of feeling, but in many situations it becomes something else entirely, a form of control that does not announce itself. Because the hardest person to influence is the one who cannot easily be hurt. And when nothing hurts, very little can be used against you. Until the next observation.